In the second part of section 5.3, here we'll start with talking about the last piece of what we can do with a trigonometric graph is stretch it horizontally. So this value over here is considered the k value of our graph, and what that does is it changes the period. Before we do anything, it's always a period of 2 pi. Which is the general form for our parent graphs. But now this k value changes it, so remember that period is 2 pi for cosine and sine. And if we want to see what that value is when it changes our k value, you take 2 pi divided by the k value, so in this case 2 pi divided by 2 gives us a value of pi. Now, to figure out the increments or the x values I'm supposed to use to keep them the same, then I need to divide this by 4. Like I said before, dividing our graph into sections of 4 is how we get those values of 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. So dividing it into the 4 quadrants with 4 of our new one gives us our new increment. So we always start with kind of 0 if there is no phase shift. If there's a phase shift, then we'll do that first, and then we'll apply our new period values. So in this case, I have 0, since there is no phase shift, and then I add pi over 4 to each one to get the new values. So pi over 4, and then pi over 4 plus pi over 4 is pi over 2, pi over 4 plus pi over 4, pi over 2 is 3 pi over 4, and then 3 pi over 4 plus pi over 4 is pi. Okay, so then that gives me my 5 values. So then here I need to multiply them by 2x, which is that first part of the cosine. So 0 times 2 is 0. Pi over 2 times 2 is 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2. 2 times pi over 2 gets me pi. 2 times 3 pi over 4 gets me 6 pi over 4, which reduces to 3 pi over 2. And pi times 2 gives me 2 pi. Notice how these values are exactly the same as what we had before. Okay, so that means that I'll be able to get those nice values of 0, 1 all the way around the circle. But yet I have these x values to graph. So these are what I'm going to plot. These are just the values that come out after I multiply by 2. So now cosine of 2x gives me cosine of 2x, which was 0, so cosine of 0 is 1. Then cosine of pi over 2 is going to be 0. Then cosine of pi gives me negative 1. Then cosine of 3 pi over 2 is 0. And then cosine of 2 pi is 1 again. Okay, so when I graph, okay, so then I have these values. So 1 was for 0, pi over 4 was 0, pi over 2 was negative 1, 3 pi over 4 was 0, and pi was 1 again. So then my graph just kind of shrinks horizontally. So if I have a value, a k value that is greater than 1, then it will shrink my graph. If I have a k value, let's fix this k here, of which is less than 1 but still greater than 0, that means it'll stretch it. So it has the opposite effect of what you would think it would be. Okay? So then now we want to be able to put all these things together. Okay? So starting with our x values, okay? I first need to figure out what my phase shift is. Looking at this, it's minus pi over 4, so that means it's moving to the right pi over 4. Okay, so the values that I usually start with, so 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. I'm going to add, or do the opposite, okay? Add pi over 4 to those, so I get pi over 4, I get 3 pi over 4, I get 5 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4, and 9 pi over 4. Okay, now look at your k value. So your k value is equal to 2, so remember that the period is equal to 2 pi over k, which is 2 pi divided by 2 in this case, so that gives me pi. So I divide that by 4 to get my new increments. So then what I need to do is I need to shift this. So starting from my value of pi over 4, okay, I'm going to instead add pi over 4 to it. So we can kind of ignore all these since we have a new period. Our period is going to shrink because those would have been values for when period was normally 2 pi. So if you wanted to, you could have just written these values to begin with and ignored all of this stuff before you got to the new period. I just wrote those out because that's kind of the process if you didn't have a new period value. So then that's like saying 2x minus pi over 4. So pi over 4, and then adding pi over 4 gets me pi over 2. Then adding pi over 4 would give me 3 pi over 4. And then adding pi over 4 gets me pi. And then the last one will be 5 pi over 4. Okay? So now I want to be able to take 3 sine of that. And let's just say I add 2 at the end as well. So I'm going to do the multiplication and then add 2 to my values. So plugging in pi over 4 into sine, because I already know this, so sine of pi over 4, or sorry, we actually need to plug it in. So pi over 4 minus pi over 4 gets me 0. 0 times 2 is 0. Sine of 0 gets me 0. 0 times 3 is 3, and 3 times, or sorry, 0 plus 2 is 2. So 3 sine of 2 pi over 4 minus pi over 4 plus 2 equals 2. Okay, so let's restate that these are my new x values. That I'm going to use to graph. So then 3 sine of 2 pi over 2 minus pi over 4 plus 2. So pi over 2 minus pi over 4 gives me pi over 4 times 2 is pi over 2. Sine of pi over 2 is 1. 1 times 3 is 3 plus 2 is 5. Okay? 3 sine of 3 pi over 4 minus pi over 4 plus 2 will give me 3 pi over 4 minus pi over 4 is pi over 2. 2 times pi over 2 is pi. Sine of pi is 0. 0 times 3 is 0. Plus 2 is 2. Okay? Then 3 sine of 2 times pi minus pi over 4 plus 2. So here, pi minus pi over 4 is 3 pi over 4. 3 pi over 4 times 2 is 2, or 3 pi over 2 times sine, or sine of 3 pi over 2 gives me negative 1. Negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. Plus 2 is a negative 1. Then the last one plugging in 5 pi over 4. So 5 pi over 4 minus pi over 4 is pi. 2 times pi is 2 pi. Sine of 2 pi is 0. 0 times 3 is 0, plus 2 is 2. Okay? So now when I go graph, so now graphing, so here I have pi over 4 is 2. And then pi over 2 was 5. And then 3 pi over 4 was 2. And then pi was negative 1. And then 5 pi over 4 was 2. So then my graph this here is shifted over pi over 4, then also squished to a period of pi instead of 2 pi, and it's stretched vertically by a value of 3 and moved up vertically by a value of 2. Now the last little bit here, I want to give you the forms for the functions of sine and cosine, so you can do this with anything. So A, remember, is the amplitude. The absolute value of the amplitude, or A value, is the amplitude. So it's always a positive value, whether you're going from the middle down or from the middle up. Doesn't matter sine or cosine. K value is the value that helps you determine what your new period is. So 2 pi over K. Then times x minus a value of b, which is your phase shift. Remember, if it's positive b, then it means you're moving the left that much. If it's minus b, it's moving you to the right that much. So the reason why they put minus in here is that it's the opposite, or get you to remember it's the opposite. That's why I wrote that there. And then plus c, if it's like a positive number, it moves you up that many values or units. And then if it's minus c, it moves you down that many units. Okay? Have fun.